The bronze was cold against my skin, colder than the marble of the tomb where my parents lay, colder than the heart of Rome under Domitian's reign. My trembling fingers tightened on the edge of the military identification tag, the signaculum that bore my name, my legion, my destiny. Lucius Valerius Strabo, 10th Legion Gemina, Centurion. But I was no longer a centurion, not a soldier, not a Roman. I was a ghost in rusted armor, hiding in the bowels of the Subura, where even the rats were afraid to whisper the emperor's name. The fine rain of that early October morning in 93 AD trickled through the broken tiles of the tenement where I slept, mixing with the dried blood on my left arm. It was not mine. It belonged to an imperial informant who, 2 hours earlier, had tried to sell me to the Praetorians for 10 denarii and a promise of pardon. He underestimated how well an ex-centurion can still use a short dagger when he has everything to lose. My name had once been respected on the walls of Germania, where I commanded 60 men with an iron fist and an eagle's eye. Now it was just a target, a traitor, a man condemned to damnatio memoriae before he was even dead, because I saw what I should not have seen. And worse, I survived to tell of it. It all began 3 months earlier on the road between Mogontiacum and Vindobona, when the 10th was dispatched to escort a supply convoy for the Danube garrisons. The winter was coming early on the frontier and the north winds cut like blades. I led the column, mounted on my bay horse, my red cloak faded by time and snow. My men trusted me. I trusted them, until the ground trembled. It wasn't an earthquake, it was worse. From within the Black Forest, shadows emerged, not just any barbarians, but Subai warriors with shields painted black and eyes empty of fear. They attacked with surgical precision, aiming only for the officers. In minutes, the tribune fell with a spear in his neck. The legatus decapitated before he could shout an order. Only I and my 60 legionaries remained, surrounded, frozen, betrayed. Because it was not a random attack. They knew exactly where we would be. They knew our schedules, our secret route, even the number of men. Someone from within the Roman camp itself had guided them. We managed to repel the attack, at the cost of 42 dead and 16 gravely wounded. I returned to Mogontiacum with half my force, my pride in tatters, an oath of vengeance boiling in my veins. But before I could report the incident to the governor, I was summoned to the imperial headquarters in Rome, a rare honor for a frontier centurion, or so I thought. In the audience hall of the Flavian Palace, high on the Palatine, Domitian received me alone. No lictors, no advisors, just him, seated on his ebony throne inlaid with ivory, his eyes fixed on me as if reading my soul. "Valerius Strabo," he said, his voice too soft for a man who had tongues torn out for jokes. "You lost men, that is acceptable. You lost supplies, that is replaceable, but you brought back something that should not exist." I held out my hands confused. "Lord." He rose, walked to a cedarwood table, and held up a scroll sealed with purple wax. This dispatch was intercepted near Lugdunum, addressed to the Subai king Marcomerus, written in Latin, with military details only a Roman officer could know. My blood froze. "I swear, Caesar, I have no." "I am not accusing you," he interrupted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I am accusing your superior, the legatus Caecina Silvanus, killed in the ambush, conveniently." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy as a tombstone. "But there are witnesses who say you found documents in his tent. Documents proving Silvanus was conspiring with the Germans to weaken the legions and demand greater autonomy for the western provinces. Pure treason." "I did find them," I admitted. "I burned them on his funeral pyre. I thought it was mercy to spare his name from infamy." Domitian laughed, a dry sound like grinding bones. "Mercy? In Rome, you are a soldier, Valerius, not a philosopher. Mercy is weakness, and weakness attracts blood." That night I was promoted. Not to tribune, that would be suspicious. but named Special Inspector of Logistical Routes with secret orders. Investigate all officers on the western frontier, identify Silvanus's accomplices, and eliminate any threat to the Empire's unity. I received a ring with the imperial seal, a bag of 100 aureus, and a warning. If you fail, there will be no trial, only disappearance. I returned to the provinces with a new title and a deadly weight on my back. For weeks, I followed leads, interrogated veterans, sifted through military archives. I discovered that Silvanus had not acted alone. There was a network, small but influential, of senators, officers, and even members of the Praetorian Guard who believed the Empire had become a monster devouring freedom. They wanted to restore the Senate as the center of power, a noble dream, in less dark times. But then I found something that changed everything. In a strongbox hidden beneath the floor of a tribune's country house in Narbo, I found letters, not just about political conspiracy. My father, Marcus Valerius Strabo, hadn't just been a centurion in the 2nd Legion. He had been one of the last secret republicans, a member of a society that had sworn to resist imperial rule since the days of Augustus. He had died in combat in Britannia, but the letters revealed the truth. He was executed by direct order of Vespasian after being discovered passing information to British rebels. And my name, it had never been erased. It was listed as a potential heir to the cause. It was then I realized Silvanus hadn't betrayed me. He had protected me. By keeping my name out of public documents, he had saved me from execution. And now, with his death, I was the only living link between the Republican past and the corrupt present. 2 days later, I received a coded message, delivered by a street urchin in Lyon. The fire of Vesta has gone out. Come to the forum before the new moon. Bring the truth or die with it. I signed with a name I hadn't used since childhood. Strabo, son of Marcus. Rome swallowed me as it always does, with indifference and hunger. The streets were full of beggars selling false amulets, merchants shouting inflated prices, and spies disguised as everything: barbers, slaves, even priestesses. I knew I was being followed. 2 men in gray tunics with a posture too military to be civilians. Praetorians. Domitian didn't even trust his own dogs. I met the contact at the temple of Castor and Pollux, under the shadow of the twin columns. It was a woman, young, dressed like a plebeian patrician, but with eyes that had seen too much. I recognized her immediately. Cornelia Faustina, daughter of the Senator Helvidius Priscus, whose family had been exterminated by Nero. She had survived by pretending to be a slave. "You are taller than the descriptions," she said, without greeting. "And you are more alive than you're supposed to be," I replied. She smiled, bitter. "Silvanus was my uncle. He told me to find you if anything happened. He said you were the only Roman with enough honor to do what must be done." "And what must be done?" "Prove that Domitian is using the charge of treason to purge the Senate of any independent voice. There are 30 senators marked to be accused in the coming months, all innocent, all dead." She handed me a roll of thin papyrus. "Here are the names of the delators paid by the emperor, and the proof that the documents against Silvanus were forged by an imperial scribe named Lucius Valerius. He lives at the baths of Agrippa, under Praetorian protection." "Why tell me this?" I asked. "Why not flee?" "Because to flee is to let Rome die in silence, and I would rather die screaming." That night we took shelter in an abandoned warehouse near the port of Ostia, far from the city's eyes. The rain fell relentlessly, and the wind made the planks groan like old bones. We were exhausted, dirty, surrounded by death, and yet between us there was something we couldn't name. Maybe it was recognition. Maybe it was desire. Maybe it was just the human need to touch someone before the world ends. She moved closer to the makeshift fire, her trembling hands holding a waterskin of watered-down wine. The flickering light danced on her face, on the firm lines of her jaw, in the dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of grief. When she handed me the skin, our fingers touched. A silent shock ran up my arm. "Do you have family?" she asked quietly. I did. My father died when I was 12. My mother of a fever 2 years later. Never married, never had children. The Legion was my home. She nodded as if she already knew. I had a sister, younger than me. Her name was Livia. Nero's soldiers took her to the palace. I never saw her again. They say she threw herself into the Tiber. I didn't know what to say, so I did what a soldier never does. I lowered my guard. I moved closer. I raised my hand and with my thumb wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Her eyes met mine, and for an instant the world stopped. I could hear only the rain, the crackle of the fire, and the sound of my own heart pounding like a war drum. She leaned in slightly, her lips parted, not in invitation but in question. And I, who had sworn never again to get attached to anything, felt the weight of that choice. Would kissing her be a betrayal of my mission, or a final reminder of what I was fighting for? But before I could decide, a noise outside, the snap of a twig. We both pulled apart as if touched by fire. Cornelia drew a dagger hidden at her waist. My gladius was already in my hand. No one came, it was just the wind. But the moment was gone, and with it, the illusion that we could have anything beyond this night. "We can't," she whispered, not looking at me. "I know." But that night, as she slept curled in a corner, I stayed awake, guarding not only the shadows, but also the desire that now burned in me, more dangerous than any blade. 2 days later, I infiltrated the baths of Agrippa like a specter. Vibius was in the caldarium, immersed in hot water scented with rose oil, laughing with 2 guards. I waited until the guards left to drink wine. Then I entered. I didn't need many words. I showed him the knife. I showed him his daughter's name, carved into the hilt, information Cornelia had given me. He confessed everything in less than 5 minutes. Yes, he had forged the documents. Yes, he had received direct orders from the imperial secretary. Yes, he knew Silvanus was innocent. "But what do you want?" he whimpered, trembling. "Money, I can give you money." "I want the truth," I said, and slit his throat with a quick, clean, silent motion. The blood mixed with the hot water, staining it dark pink. Before leaving, I took the forged originals, hidden in a cedar box under his bed, and replaced them with false copies that implicated the imperial secretary himself as the traitor. A perfect bait. 3 days later, chaos erupted. The secretary was arrested in the middle of the forum, screaming his innocence as the Praetorians dragged him to the Tullianum. Domitian, furious, ordered internal investigations. The imperial court collapsed in suspicion. And in the midst of it all, Cornelia and I organized a secret meeting with the remaining senators. Not all of them, just those who still had courage. In the sewers beneath the Circus Maximus, amid the stench of waste and mold, 30 men swore to resist. Not with weapons, not yet, but with asterisk testimony. Each one had proof of corruption, of illegal executions, of extortion. Together, they formed a mosaic of tyranny. "But how do we expose this?" asked an old senator, his voice trembling. "Domitian controls the heralds, the scribes, even the temples." It was then I had the most dangerous idea of my life. "We will use what he fears most, public opinion." The next day, we spread anonymous copies of the forged documents, now altered to show that Domitian planned to raise taxes by 50% and recruit children as imperial slaves. We left the scrolls in taverns, markets, even on the doors of the wealthy. All of Rome began to murmur. The emperor reacted like a wounded lion. He ordered mass arrests. He had books burned. He forbade public gatherings, but it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. And then, on the eve of the Ides of September, Cornelia appeared at my hiding place, her face pale. "They have you." One of the senators talked under torture. "Praetorians will surround this place at dawn." "And you?" I asked. I don't matter anymore. My mission was to deliver the truth. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with it. I gave her the only original copy of the forged documents, the real one, with the scribe's signature. Take this to Pliny the Younger. He has the courage to write, and the world will read it. She hesitated, her eyes moist. And us? There was no us. There never had been, and yet I wanted there to be. If Rome survives, perhaps there will be a place for us in it. She moved closer, placed her hand on my chest over my heart. Then survive. And she kissed me. It was brief, fierce, full of promises neither of us believed could be kept. Her lips tasted of salt and cheap wine and of something older, hope. When she pulled away, she was already leaving, disappearing into the alleys like a shadow that never existed. At dawn, I didn't try to flee. I waited. When the Praetorians broke down the door, I was standing, my old armor polished, gladius at my hip, red cloak over my shoulders. I looked like a centurion again. Lucius Valerius Strabo. The commander said, recognizing me, "You are under arrest for treason, sedition, and murder." "I am ready," I replied. But instead of surrendering, I drew my sword. Not for vengeance, not for glory, for asterisk testimony. I fought like a man who has already accepted death. I killed 3 Praetorians before a spear pierced my lung. I fell to my knees, blood bubbling on my lips, the rising sun illuminating the forum like a golden altar. The commander approached, raising his sword for the final blow. "Last words, traitor." I took a deep breath, tasting iron, and for an instant the echo of Cornelia's kiss. "Tell the emperor that Rome is not killed with swords, it is killed with silence, and today there will be no silence asterisk." He hesitated. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the obedient soldier versus the Roman who still remembered what justice meant. But then he raised the blade. The bronze hissed as it met flesh. Domitian was assassinated 1 year later, in 96 AD, by members of his own court. His name was erased from inscriptions, his statues torn down, his memory cursed. Nerva ascended, promising to restore the dignity of the state. Cornelia Faustina became the patron of a school for war orphans in Ostia. She never married. They say that every morning she lit a candle before a small statue of Mars, not as the god of war, but as the guardian of those who fight for justice. And that in her room she kept a bronze signaculum asterisk, engraved with the name of a centurion who chose truth, and for a brief moment allowed himself to love. As for the documents, Pliny included them in his letters, which survived centuries. Modern historians still debate their authenticity, but the Romans of the time knew the truth. And me, my body was thrown into the common grave for traitors. But years later, an old legionary from the 10th placed a simple plaque in the foreigner's field. "Here lies Lucius Valerius Strabo, who chose truth over life, and for a kiss, remembered what it was to be human." Today, when the wind blows through the ruins of the Forum, some swear they hear the echo of marching boots, not in obedience, but in resistance. And on the darkest nights, when Rome seems about to succumb to fear once more, someone always whispers, "Remember Strabo." Because the greatest weapon against tyranny was never the sword. It was the courage to speak the truth, and even in the face of death, to feel the warmth of a human touch. The bronze was cold against my skin, but for an instant, someone made me remember that I still had warm blood in my veins.